All right, welcome to this operational briefing. Today, we're diving deep into some of the most common tools you'll see adversaries using on the dark web. Now, our goal here is purely defensive. It's all about understanding their tradecraft so that we can get better at detection, disruption, and ultimately neutralizing threats. So let's get right into it.
Now, it is absolutely critical that we frame the dark web correctly. For us as defenders, especially heading into the future, this isn't some theoretical, abstract concept. You have to see it for what it is, a live, active theater of operations. It's the staging ground where threat actors are testing their tools, they're exchanging intelligence, and they're preparing for real-world attacks. So our entire defensive posture has to reflect that reality.
And this brings up a really critical point. The threat isn't the tool itself. We're not just analyzing a list of malicious software. Most of what we're going to talk about are actually dual-use privacy technologies. The real threat that emerges from the tradecraft. It's how adversaries combine and layer these tools to achieve a malicious objective. And that's exactly what we're here to do, deconstruct that tradecraft. Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to tackle this in 4 parts. First, we'll cover anonymization and access layers. Then, we'll move into covert infrastructure and communication. After that, we'll look at how cryptography is used in malicious operations. And finally, we'll wrap up with the defender's mandate.
All right, Section 1, Anonymization and Access Layers. Think of this as the foundation for any covert campaign. The entire objective here is to obscure operational origins, to mask identity, location, and intent right from the very first packet, making attribution a nightmare.
So, the first tool we have to talk about, of course, is the Onion Router, or TOR. Its multi-hop layered encryption is really the bedrock of dark web operations. For threat actors, it's their go-to utility for everything from accessing underground marketplaces to hosting incredibly resilient C2 infrastructure. So what does this mean for us as defenders? Well, it means network monitoring can't just be about flagging TOR traffic. That's not enough. The focus has to shift to baselining what normal TOR usage looks like in your environment so you can spot the anomalous patterns, things like high-volume data transfers or persistent connections to known malicious exit nodes.
Okay, so to get on TOR, you need specific hardened browsers, and these browsers leave behind some very distinct forensic artifacts. What you're looking at here are key indicators we can hunt for both on the endpoint and in our network telemetry. Things like disabled scripts, artifacts from session isolation, or unusual user agent strings in your logs. These are all strong signals that a user is operating with heightened OPSEC, and that alone should be enough to trigger a deeper investigation.
And this is where it gets more complex. What we're illustrating here is the concept of chaining. Adversaries almost never rely on just one tool. A very common pattern is to layer a commercial VPN on top of the TOR network. This adds yet another layer of obfuscation, and believe me, it makes attribution significantly more difficult for us.
So, when you have this kind of layering, traditional IP block listing just isn't going to cut it anymore. It's insufficient. Our defensive strategy has to pivot. We need to start focusing on behavioral and identity-based indicators. That means digging into authentication logs, looking for anomalies, and correlating connection timing. It's these higher-level analytics that are absolutely essential for finding the signal in all this noise.
And that brings us right into Section 2, Covert Infrastructure and Communication. So, once an adversary has established their anonymity, what's next? Well, the next phase is to build out their C2 infrastructure, something that's persistent, resilient, and most importantly, hidden.
Now, it's important to draw a key distinction here between TOR and another anonymizing network, I2P. You can think of TOR as mainly an anonymizing gateway to the public internet. I2P, on the other hand, is optimized for hidden services that exist only within its own decentralized network. It's like a network within a network. And this very feature makes it a preferred choice for certain malware families, Anubis is a great example, that use I2P for C2 communications that are totally self-contained and incredibly resilient.
Then you have something like Freenet, which presents a completely different paradigm. We're not just talking about communication anymore, we're talking about data storage. Because it's a distributed peer-to-peer data store, it gives adversaries a way to host malicious content or even exfiltrate data that completely bypasses conventional cloud or dedicated server hosting. And, as you can imagine, that makes detection a whole lot more challenging.
Adversaries love to abuse legitimate, everyday protocols for post-exploitation. It's a classic living-off-the-land technique. And Secure Shell, or SSH, is a prime example. They use it for lateral movement, for persistence,
So our monitoring has to be laser-focused on spotting the indicators of malicious use. Things like logins from weird geolocations, tunnels that stay open for way too long for any normal admin task, or command patterns that just scream C2 activity. Which leads us perfectly into our third section, how cryptography is used in malicious operations. This is all about OPSEC for the threat actors. It's what they use to protect their communications, their data, and their identities from ever being intercepted or analyzed.
And when it comes to secrecy, GPG or PGP is the absolute bedrock of trust in underground economies. It's the standard they use to encrypt messages, to verify each other's identities, and to secure massive troves of stolen data. So for incident responders, if you come across PGP encrypted archives during a breach, that is a huge red flag. It's a strong indicator of a sophisticated data exfiltration op, and it presents some pretty significant challenges for your forensic analysis.
And in that same vein, you've got the foundational open SSL library, which is constantly being co-opted. Threat actors abuse it all the time to implement custom encryption for their C2 traffic or to generate self-signed certs for their malicious infrastructure. As a defender, you absolutely have to be able to spot suspicious or, frankly, weak crypto implementations. They can be a dead giveaway for custom malware.
Okay, that brings us to our final section, the Defender's Mandate. We've looked at the tools, we've analyzed the Tradecraft, so now what? Now we have to synthesize all of this into a coherent, strategic framework for defense.
And this table really maps it all out. It connects the tool categories we've talked about to specific defensive actions. So, for anonymization and access tools, your primary focus has to be behavioral analysis and network telemetry. For infrastructure and communications, you're looking at traffic signatures and tight access control monitoring. And when it comes to cryptography, it's all about deep payload analysis and rigorous certificate validation. It's a simple but powerful strategic summary.
And this leads to some really important professional best practices. First, any research into these tools must, and I mean must, be done in a controlled, isolated lab environment. Second, your focus should always be on finding detection opportunities, not trying to replicate the attack. And above all, everything you do has to be ethical, legal, and completely in line with your organizational policies. The Tradecraft is always evolving, which means our learning can never stop.
So, I'll conclude by leaving you with this critical question. It's not enough just to be aware that these tools exist. You have to ask yourself, how are you actively and continuously stress testing your detection strategies against the tradecraft they enable? Because in the end, that proactive posture is the only way we're going to maintain an advantage against the threat that is constantly evolving.